Hey y'all, Happy New Year and welcome to Bama Blue Dots. I'm Kat.
And I'm Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us this week. We hope y'all had an amazing holiday season full of light and laughter.
Michelle, how was your holidays?
It was pretty good. Stayed home, enjoyed the family, didn't really do very much decorating, put up a simple tree and
We didn't even do a tree. Like 2 days before Christmas, Justin came home with this little like miniature one that was pre-lit. And then we spent pretty much the entire time trying to keep the cats from knocking it over. But yeah, we did similar, just kind of kept it low key. New Year's Eve, I don't know about you, but New Year's Eve, I feel like is always that holiday that gets amped up to be something so much fun and so amazing, but it always sucks. Like, I never go out on New Year's and I'm like, I'm so glad I went to that.
I think it would probably be different if you lived like in New York City or Chicago, somewhere where there was like big events and big parties and stuff, or just even had a party to attend. But I was sick. I don't know what I picked up, where I picked it up at, but I had whatever was floating around.
I had no norovirus. I was miserable.
Yeah, I was rolled up and just not feeling very good for a few days. It was a good reset though, because I hit the ground running yesterday and ready to get back at it.
New nonsense. So, Venezuela. I think all of us woke up this weekend with a myriad of reactions. And some of us, I think, saw World War III on the horizon. A lot of us got flashbacks to the Iraq War. And a lot of us really didn't quite know what to feel. I saw it, I just felt numb. I was like, oh God, here we go again. I want to say this because there's a lot of obvious misinformation out there, assumptions on social media. I want to make this abundantly clear. I in no way support Maduro at all. In fact, I think a lot of the issues with him, and I think the things that make him such a shitty leader, are things that Trump does and has done. They really are almost the same guy. But this was not the way to do it. Trump ran on a very strong no new wars, no nation building, America first platform. Shocker, he lied about that too. The United States has no business illegally entering a foreign nation and kidnapping their leader in the middle of the night. And they're trying to say he's a narco terrorist. Am I wrong? Trump has made most of his like war on drugs, particularly about fentanyl, correct?
Yes.
Fentanyl doesn't come from Venezuela. It comes from China via Mexico. Same goes for heroin. Cocaine is the only thing that's being trafficked from Venezuela to the United States, and I'm pretty sure his oligarchs don't give a shit about that. But this is about oil. Let's be real here. This is 100% about oil. And Trump is admitting it. Did you see that presser he did on Air Force One where Lindsey Graham and all them are trying to be like, oh, this is about the drugs. This is about this. And he just kept interjecting and talking about the oil.
And he mentioned Venezuela in his first term, but I point back to the Heritage Foundation. This has kind of been in their roadmap for a very long time. And if you look at the dynamics here, is it Panama or is it Poland? And I think it's a combination. This administration tends to do a lot of things where it's multifaceted. I absolutely believe it's the oil. I believe it's him thumbing his nose at the Middle East saying, we are not dependent on you for our oil. I think it absolutely is because Stephen Miller, in his special little seat right over it,
Because Stephen Miller's now in charge of the country.
yeah,
What the fuck?
and this is going to become our version of Poland because that's where the vast majority of the death camps were. Is this where we're going to ship people off to? I think there's a lot of facets here to look at, and it's very scary that we have the absolute audacity to go in and do something like that. It's bad enough we interfere with a lot of countries. We should not be sticking our nose in, let alone the way we did it. It's ridiculous.
What's killing me is that Trump was asked, why didn't you consult with Congress? He didn't consult with Congress. You know who he did consult with before and after this kidnapping? The oil companies, oil executives. They knew about it beforehand. I'm sorry. Since when did oil companies CEOs, since when are they being consulted on affairs of national security? Before Congress is? And then they're all acting like idiots. Like they've been asked, well, what happens now? What's the plan for the country? Is there going to be elections? And no one has an answer. It's like they kidnapped the guy, stuffed him in the trunk of the car, and then have no idea where to take the getaway car to. They didn't even think about that.
It's par for course, though. I mean, that's literally every half hatched plan that they've launched this year is let's just get it out the door and see what sticks, and it's why they've been shut down so often in the lower court systems. It's just slapping jelly on a wall until something sticks.
And now they're talking about doing Cuba. Why are we talking about Greenland again?
I don't think that's not going to happen. The Dutch will slap fight somebody. I'm surprised we haven't seen more countries disengage and put an embargo on us. Like, I'm very, very surprised that, but then I'm not, because like Tesla, you have Norway, who is a stakeholder, and they're perpetuating this administration. And that's the problem there, is that people are too, there's too much money tied for them to make those decisions, but they should regardless. Prioritizing your pockets over the future, it's going to end poorly for everybody.
I mean, at this point, this all just feels like 2004 again. We had no business going in there. I hate to say this, but at least Bush was able to utilize 9/11 as an excuse. This came out of fucking nowhere. This was just honestly, this was a distraction from the Epstein files again. That is all this was. I knew he was going to start doing crazy stuff after the new year.
Didn't they have a deadline this past Friday, Saturday?
There was a thing they had so they had the original deadline in December that they had to release all the files, and obviously they didn't. I was trying to look that up and I couldn't find anything. I was trying to see, I think there was like they had to explain why.
Correct. Yeah, why it was redacted. Yeah,
I was trying to look that up though, but I think that's what it was. They had to say like, here's why it was all redacted because there's over 2 million documents that were not provided.
correct. And they were still heavily redacted. And I understand about the victims. You don't want their names getting out. However, that does not absolve everybody else.
I doubt those entire pages that were just one black square. I doubt that that page was just one victim's name over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely not. And it's insane to me that this is the way they try to distract.
Killing people and start potentially starting a war.
Kidnapping leaders, like, that is such a bully scare tactic.
I just want to know if it's so easy to go in and do that, why can't someone do that to us? Come on, Canada. It's low hanging fruit. Like, come on, guys. It just, I mean, can someone please do that to us? Like, if it's so easy,
I know, right?
I would take just about anywhere doing that. Please.
I'm like, if there is a God, Satan, you need to come get your babies. This is not a daycare. It's past 5 o'clock. Like, we're all ready to go home, and you've left your babies here way too long. Please come get to all your children. They need to go back home with you, because I'm tired of them already. Like, I'm kind of excited about this midterm elections, just so we can finally get rid of them.
And there's so much more to this. I'm sure this isn't the last time we're going to discuss it, but for now, we got to keep our focus. We've got to focus on our goals going into 2026. And we're going to talk about that a bit more after the break. Want more Bama Blue Dot content? Make sure to follow us on Blue Sky, TikTok, and YouTube at Bama Blue Dots, or visit us at BamaBlueDots.com.
Welcome back. With a new year, we got to talk about new things. It's midterm year, and we need to figure out everything we can do to flip as many seats blue. While the Democratic Party is far from perfect, we need to look at keeping the ship afloat if we're going to move forward. In Alabama specifically, we've got a lot of issues that need to be addressed, and there seems to be multiple candidates stepping up to the plate to run as Democrats. But before we discuss the candidates, we got to talk about the issues facing Alabama.
And God knows there's so many. Where we even start? Healthcare has been a huge topic lately, nationwide. And Alabama is notoriously terrible when it comes to that. Currently, Alabama ranks 42nd in healthcare system performance. A 2025 report shows that nearly half of Alabama's rural hospitals are at risk of closing. We have 5 counties where there's no access to an OB. We have the 3rd highest infant mortality rate, the 9th highest maternal mortality rate, 3rd highest obesity rate. We ranked 43rd in access to prenatal care, and 130,000 Alabamians are expected to lose their health care as these subsidies expire. Well, that just sounds pro-life as it gets to me. You would think in a state that prides itself on being a pro-life state, we would actually give a shit about life. I am so beyond grateful that I get healthcare through my husband's employer, but all it takes is one round of layoffs and I lose that. And don't get me started on the maternal care as a woman who is hoping to start a family and has a family history of pregnancy complications. I am terrified of potentially losing my own life should something happen. I can't receive the necessary care. There are so many issues, but healthcare, I feel like, is something that is just such a big topic right now. Michelle, like, what are your thoughts on the situation in the state?
Yeah. So, one thing I think people need to realize is that miscarriages are way more common than actually carrying a child to term. It happens more often than not. Most women, oh, I'm late a week. There's just a lot that happens. And that's usually why you don't even get to see an OB until you're at least 6 weeks along, because in that first 6 weeks of your missed period, there's so much that can go wrong. One cell division, one wrong cell division, and your body's like, nope, not happening today. And you just may think your period's late. Well, there's so many different complications that can happen with that. And that's why access to women's health care is so vital. But I agree with you. I'm in the same boat. I am very fortunate my husband's job provides health care and it's one round of layoffs, and we're without health care. There have been times here in this past even 6 to 8 months, and he's got decent health care where I had an incident. I had a nerve I pinched and it caused a muscle in my diaphragm to act real funny. Of course, at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Of course. It's never between 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, ever.
Ever. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning and you're like, oh my God. I could not take a breath. And of course, Google told me my lung was collapsing. And I was sitting here debating in my head, was it bad enough? And did we have emergency room money? Because not only is it the emergency room fee, but then if your physician is in network,
And you don't even know if they're in or out of network until after the bill comes.
you don't get a choice.
And it could be that the radiologist isn't in network. Your
Correct.
doctor is, but your radiologist isn't, or the anesthesiologist isn't, or somebody else who you're seeing in the time that you're being treated. It's not just your doctor
Yeah,
or just the hospital. It can be any of the millions of practitioners you might see.
exactly. And that was my thought. I shouldn't have these thoughts. These are not, do I have emergency room money? Do I have money to be able to afford this, especially with how expensive things are now? People live paycheck to paycheck. And that is not splurging. That is base minimum, paying your bills and skating by. That's frightening to me. It shouldn't be like this. We shouldn't live on a wire because that leads to other health issues that just then compound and increase your risk of having one of these life altering emergencies that financially destroy you.
And it's never going to get any better as long as our politicians are either completely obtuse to how healthcare works or don't give a shit. I think I told you the story. I called Barry Moore's office recently, our congressman from Alabama District 1. He had put a Facebook post up and it was regarding the Label Act. There was no context about it. It just said supporting the Label Act. So I called his office and said, hey, what is this? They said it would require the labeling of all prescription drugs. Well, that's already required by law. So I asked them, "Isn't that already a law?" They forwarded me to his healthcare advisor. It sounded like a 20-year-old dude bro. This kid told me that it was because other states, such as California, are writing prescriptions for abortion drugs such as mifepristone and not labeling them in order to help women that are having to cross state lines. And I said, "Well, why is Alabama rep writing legislation based on what's happening in California? Also, aren't y'all so big on states' rights? Like, isn't that y'all's whole thing, especially when it comes to abortion, is leaving it to the states?" And he told me a story about a man in Texas whose partner went to California to get abortion pills, and the guy didn't want her to have this abortion. And so he wanted to know who he could sue. So again, I said, well, why the hell is my congressman from Alabama District 1 writing legislation based on what's happening in Texas or California? He proceeds to try to throw a bunch of emotional stuff in there, like, "He had names picked out. Do you wanna hear them?" I said, "You could tell me, but I'm not gonna give a shit." So then he just goes in this huge, long, unhinged rant about abortion and pro-life nonsense, and I push him further, ask, "Okay, so if you're so pro-life, why is the congressman in favor of cutting these Medicare and Medicaid subsidies? Because it's going to eliminate healthcare for over 100,000 Alabamians." He then proceeds to tell me, "Oh, well, there's too much fraud." I said, "Oh." Well, what kind of fraud? Knowing that he full well he was gonna try to tell me that illegal immigrants are getting Medicaid and Medicare, which you and I both know is completely false. That is not happening. They physically can't. They don't have a Social Security number. They can't even apply for it. Then he tells me that millions of people who have Medicaid or Medicare don't make a single claim in a year. Do you think millions of people aren't seeing a doctor? I was speechless. And then he started getting real worked up. I told him he was getting emotional and was making me uncomfortable, and he hung up on me. But I was like, how do we expect them to do anything to help us if they are either stupid and completely ignorant or blatantly lying?
Going off feelings, not facts. And that's part of the problem with this administration is it's a bunch of misinformation and they're trying to black swan every single situation. And yeah, there are a lot of medications that have secondary uses. Methotrexate is a good one. It's a very old one. It is used for psoriasis, and but it also can induce an abortion. How they label them doesn't matter. That is a conversation between
You and your doctor. And I even tried to give his office an out. I'm trying to like, well, is this a safety thing? Because like, let's say that she took the drug, this woman from Texas who went to California. Let's say she took the drugs back to Texas, took them and had a horrible reaction, and they had to call 911. At that point, those EMTs and the doctors at the hospital she goes to would need to know she had just taken that. I was like, if you try to tell me that's the reasoning, I could actually justify that. That makes sense. No, that wasn't it. They went right to it being a thing to punish women. They didn't even try to hide it. And they try to sit here and convince people that raising the minimum wage is going to hurt them. They do it with education. We are consistently in the bottom 10 nationally when it comes to literacy rate, but they just choose to focus on litter boxes, critical race theory, and supposed war on Christianity, none of which are issues that actually fucking exist.
it's especially frustrating as somebody who is trying to raise my son to be extremely empathetic, both my boys, to understand that they need to be open minded and they need to be aware of what's happening around them because the government seems to think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, they see empathy as a woke thing. They see empathy as bad.
Woke is anything they don't like.
If you look up the Webster dictionary, it means that you are cognizant of racial and other social injustices. That's all it means. Is I recognize that there are social injustices in the world. How was that bad?
Exactly. It's not. It's not at all. And it frustrates the shit out of me because my boys are bombarded with this Sigma Chad male shit that is just absolute the most horrible I've ever heard. I play online games, you do too.
Yeah.
The way that young men have been emboldened to talk to women, they damn sure wouldn't say that to my face, but they feel very comfortable
Mhm.
saying it behind a mic. And I hope my children would never feel emboldened to one to talk to somebody like that. Like they would have enough humility and like sense around them. They would be like, "Oh, cool, there's another person here," not, "Oh, it's a girl," and then go off and say a bunch of nasty things to her. Like that's not who I want to raise. I don't know what I would do if I ever heard them talk to somebody like that. Like I don't even like them being spicy with their friends. Usually I'm the one going, "Hey, you better calm it down in there." It's crazy to me. Like it's
Yeah.
just being emboldened by this
Yeah. Oh,
administration.
we told my nephew if he gets suspended from school for like beating up some little kid because he said to a girl, "Your body, my choice." I was like, if you beat his ass and you get suspended, you get to come stay at Aunt Kat and Uncle Justin's house for the weekend. I don't care. We will have ice cream for dinner. We will play video games. It's basically Disney World. You will never be in trouble for standing up for somebody ever. But if you're a bully, oh hell no.
We need to make it shameful to be this nasty in 2026. That needs to be everybody's like bingo card goal and like their life goal is in 2026. It is shameful once again to be this nasty, this level of rhetoric, and they should be shamed back into the corner that they came from.
Yeah, like we've got to start speaking up. And, as women too, it's not just the 20-year-old boys, it's the white women. Do you know, like those local what's happening in Facebook groups are such a cesspool of toxic white mediocrity.
So milk toast. It's so gross.
The people who sit there and complain about, I saw one post where this woman's going off about how her son learned about the Quran in school. It was a world religions class He learned that it exists, and they just freak out about this stuff. If you want to teach your kids that creationist bullshit, homeschool or send them to a Christian school. But stop trying to act like you're victims because we don't want you imposing your religion on all of us. It's the same people who are reacting, to Mom Donnie's election. Oh, we're going to have Sharia law. You're the ones who want Sharia law.
Mhm.
You want a white Christian nationalist theocratic society.
Yep.
You're the ones who want Sharia law.
Oh, yeah. You're closer to Al Qaeda than the left will ever be.
And they don't see it. Like, they would love Sharia law, actually. They'd be all about it. Like, if you break it down, kind of want to do that. Like, break it down, like, just not mention that it's Muslim and take out some
Mhm.
of the things that are very distinctly, like the word Quran, and replace it with Bible and just see if they actually are like, oh, yeah, that sounds really great. Well, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the coming weeks. But have you read Project Esther?
Yes, it is that white Christian nationalist rabbit hole with the Heritage Foundation, Rush Dooney, and a bunch of other shenanigans that it will be a whole episode in upon itself because there's so much that we would need to discuss. And there are quite a few experts I would need to lean in on because there's so much going on. But yes, but it is a good thing to talk about because most people don't realize where this stems from.
Basically, The Handmaid's Tale, they watched it and said, that looks like a great idea. But we're going to discuss that more in depth in a different episode. And after the break, we're going to start looking more to 2026 and talking about some of the candidates that already seem to be making a stir out there.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. To help us connect with other Blue Dots in Alabama and get bonus content, make sure to follow us on YouTube at Bama Blue Dots. Well, welcome back. Let's take a look to our future now and talk about some of the candidates that we know are running so far. This week, we're going to focus on statewide offices, specifically the races for governor and U.S. Senate. Let's start with the governor's race. Right now, the favorite on the Republican side seems to be everyone's favorite. Thank goodness Pixie's not here. Favorite Floridian, Tommy Tuberville. On the left, we've got three candidates, which is great to see. Just want to preface that as fantastic to see. One who many people know, and two who are much less known. So we have former U.S. Senator Doug Jones. Then we have Dr. Will Boyd. And finally, Chad Chig Martin.
I think all three of them have a lot of positives going for them. Doug has obviously won before. I remember in 2017, he shocked the country in narrowly being Roy Moore. And he's been somewhat of a poster boy for the Alabama progressive movement ever since.
But, in true Doug Jones fashion, he's going to be running on centrist platform and appealing to that middle of the road milk toast, what people would say traditional Democratic establishment. According to his campaign website, his priorities will be a state lottery, which I'm in favor for, implementing early voting, and then no more straight ticket ballots, maternal health care, IVF, and then contraceptives and contraception, as well as expanding Medicaid.
Okay, I like Doug Jones. I've always liked Doug Jones. I think he was great in 2017. I think he did a fabulous job of being a true bipartisan senator. I mean, he voted pretty much, if you're looking at percentages of when he voted with Democrats versus Republicans, he was pretty split down the middle. He was a true centrist. I wish we could have more people like that in our government right now, because right now it seems like nothing can ever get done because it's all about screwing over the other side. The Senate has pretty much been kind of dead weight at this point. So I do like the idea of somebody who is able to work across the aisle. But I think we need to have that from the other side and not necessarily us. But I'm seeing a huge push toward more progressive. Progressives are speaking out more. And there has been a huge surge toward that. And I wonder, is getting the centrists or the non MAGA Republicans to vote for him going to be enough to rally the Democratic base?
I think that requires a little bit more digging into the data because while they believe that pulling these voters over. What about the people who just don't vote? So here's a really good example. Our county is split up into 4 different districts. I was looking at District 3, and this was based off the 2024 general election. Has almost 25,000. I mean, it's a hair's breadth away from being 25,000 registered voters. That's as of today. If I go in there and pull the data, it's 25,000 registered. Do you know how many people actually showed up to the polls for general elections? Do you want to take a wild guess?
50%?
The it was more. It was around 16,000. So what happened to 9,000 people? Where were those 9,000 people? Was it because they were working and we don't have holidays off, so they couldn't take time off? Did they have lack of transportation? Was it because the Democrats don't produce anything but milk toast, uninspiring old white men?
And I think there's a lot of belief around here, especially I've talked to a lot of people that are left leaning, more progressive, maybe not necessarily a Democrat, but just left leaning or progressive. And a lot of people have said, well, what's the point in voting? And a lot of what we're doing with this podcast, the goal we had setting out was to connect the blue dots to each other and create a sense of community. I know we're both in Baldwin County, so we'd love to do that locally, but also at the state level. I think that's a big piece of it too. So there is obvious voter suppression issues and things like that. But I think a lot of it, especially from white Southern progressives, is kind of a feeling of hopelessness. Like, what's the point? Yeah, I remember sitting in line for 3 hours in 2020. If I had had a baby or, was disabled, that wouldn't have been possible. And, there have been woke up on election day last year, it was raining. I was like, "Well, should I?" Yes, I absolutely have to. But it's really I see where it can feel like they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and getting the same result. I can see how that would you would start to kind of feel that way.
Yeah, and I think we need to have more standards when it comes to who we put up versus what we accept, because I think that's where we're losing, where you hear this side, both are the same. Well, yeah, if we always put up centrist Democrats, unfortunately, the center has been moved. The center is now far into the right side. We have got to stop doing this thing where we're just like, oh, he won before. Yay, let's go for it. I get it. He brings excitement. We want the excitement, but we also need to understand until the primaries are over, we have so many options. We should go down every freaking path because that's how you end up with the Zoran is being excited about everyone and getting the energy there for everyone to run in a free, open, fair election. And then once the primary is over, then yes, you put your hat in for whatever those results are. But it's very frightening to me sometimes to see people double down, knowing we have so many disenfranchised voters and so many people that are not showing up to the polls because they feel like both sides are the same and we're not providing a change for them.
We do have a more progressive candidate running. We've got Dr. Will Boyd. He has gained a lot of traction within the party from progressives and also a lot of independents. The man's resume reads like a novel. He has multiple degrees, Bachelor of Science in Engineering. He's got an MBA, doctorates in religion, psychology, and organizational management. He's served as the chancellor of St. James, the Elder University, and dean of student success and as an assistant professor of management at Greenville College. He's written 3 books on values, leadership, and faith. And he's really running on platforms that are very, very specific to Alabama and very pointed. Prison reform, improved wages and workers' rights, ending voter suppression, expanding access to healthcare and education, improving environmental protections. And he's also been officially endorsed by the Alabama Cannabis Coalition.
So sometimes, for me personally, when I hear people lead with religion, it frightens me, especially how this current establishment is with its Christian white nationalists. Would you prioritize your personal beliefs over the safety and well being of your constituents? And that's what we're seeing. But it's good to see somebody who does have their faith and can still step forward and say, you know what? This isn't what rules me. That they just add that as like a building block to their who they are.
Well, and the thing I love is that his platforms are not necessarily Democratic talking points. His platforms are very specific to Alabama. Prison reform is something that's huge, and especially with that new Netflix documentary that came out, the Alabama Solution, that is something that is a very hot topic right now. Improved wages and workers' rights. He's very pro union, ending voter suppression. That's huge. We've lost DMVs. There are counties, especially small rural counties through the Black Belt, where there is one voting house. There is one place that people can go vote. And when you don't have any sort of public transit and things like that, that pretty much disenfranchises anybody who doesn't have a vehicle. Expanding access to healthcare and education, things we touched on earlier. Alabama's not great at either of those things. Environmental protections. We are one of the most biodiverse areas in the country. And we are letting corporations come in here and just,
And it has lasting effects for generations.
I think there's a reason Baldwin County is a cancer cluster.
Yeah, talking about Sally's Ashes earlier, and I do hope we figure out how to get tickets to it so I can go watch it, the screening of it.
I know there's a screening in Spanish for it on January 29th.
I lost both my grandparents literally within 2 years of each other of aggressive colon cancer, and they ate out of the Mobile Bay. This is back in the, like, late '70s through the '80s. They died, like, late '80s, like '89 and then '91 of the same thing, of the same type. They ate out of that bay. They went and they shrimped and they crabbed, and it just I lost my grandmother, somebody I loved dearly, at a very young age. She could possibly still be alive today to see her great-grandchildren. So I'm glad somebody's addressing it.
Yeah, and the Alabama Cannabis Coalition, obviously HB 445 pissed a lot of people off last year. That was something that was kind of done in silence, kind of done behind closed doors, and by the time anyone really knew about it, it was too late. I have a good idea of why that law passed. A lot of it is hearsay, but I will say that it was not because pot's a gateway drug or whatever they tried to say. There was aggressive lobbying that led to it. And that is something where I feel like both sides have been kind of united is access to marijuana and cannabis. But I do like that he's keeping this very focused on the specific issues that face Alabama and not the typical partisan talking points. Yes, he believes in access to IVF and all of those things and a women's right to choose, but he's not making it his main platform.
Yeah, and I like that. I like the fact that he understands, he's heard the voices, he's heard the pain, and he understands things that need to be worked on, but his prioritization is, "Hey, let's address this horrible."
He's using the Zoran model. Let me talk about issues that actually affect these people. Let's not talk about issues that only impact maybe 1% of the population, or let's not talk about issues that don't affect us on a day to day basis. He's talking about issues that actually do impact Alabamians across party lines. The last candidate we're going to talk about is Chad Chig Martin. He's from Enterprise. He actually founded America's first hemp dispensary, the Honeysuckle Hemp Company. His campaign has been focusing on loosening regulations on cannabis and healthcare, expanding access to holistic medicine and alternative medicines, create an education lottery, conservation, and advocacy.
Cool. I absolutely am about animal advocacy, but, like, in the order of priority with what's currently happening, is is that the appropriate talking points and platform, and who are you actually talking to?
Yeah. He's kind of given me some like RFK, Gary Johnson type vibes, especially his focus on holistic and alternative medicines. Like, yes, I think that you should have the right to, alternative forms of healthcare. If your doctor's telling you only chemo, I know immunotherapy is something that has really been aggressively studied in the last couple of years. I know somebody who it saved her life. Like, I think you should have the right to talk to your doctor, but that doesn't include essential oils and elderberry syrups.
Yeah, if you wanna put that in line with what you're doing to help you feel better through the process, we need to use science along with taking care and maintaining your body. So, like, it's the same as when you go to the doctor and they ask you, "What do you eat? Are you exercising?" and all that. It's not to stop you because there's no magic pill. There's nothing ever that's gonna get you to the end.
Also feels like a dog whistle for anti-vax stuff. That's just my opinion. He hasn't said that he's anti-vax or anything like that. But when somebody starts talking a lot about holistic medicine, alternative medicine, that's immediately where my brain goes to is that it's about vaccines. And I think the one exception for, your body, your choice, healthcare is when it endangers or harms other people. My rights end where they hurt others.
Correct, and your rights should never impede somebody
Hmm.
else, and that's the whole point of vaccinations. The herd immunity, more people
Oh,
being vaccinated is better than a vast majority being unvaccinated because then you don't get that immunity response and then you start infringing on people who cannot get the vaccine at all. And we're talking about actual, factual medical reasons.
Yeah, like, I know someone whose son is allergic to, like, a stabilizing ingredient or something like that they put in vaccines, like, that's a totally different.
That is a legitimate case, but then their son is now relying on the vast majority of us being vaccinated so we don't spread cooties.
Again, I'm not saying that he's anti-vax, he has never said he's anti-vax, but it feels like a dog whistle for that.
And maybe he's just not aware that the optics on it look bad if you don't qualify your statements with, I believe XYZ. Now, obviously, we don't control what he says and how he says things, but given the space, I would say, hey, that feels like that's X adjacent. I would probably rephrase it if that's not your intention to sound like that.
He feels like he's giving me major, like, libertarian, independent type vibes. I don't know if he's necessarily a Democrat or a true progressive. I think that he kind of fits somewhere in the middle, and I'm totally willing to work with somebody that's in the middle from the right because we need some of that, but I don't think that's what the Democrats right now are really yearning for, and I also don't like the fact that he's been known to block women who question him on TikTok. But that covers our current candidates for governor. After the break, we're gonna get into the senatorial race. Want to listen to Bama Blue Dots on the go? Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify and tune in every Thursday for new episodes.
Welcome back. And we're going to start this off talking about one of the major races being watched, which is, Florida, Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville. His seat, as he's running for governor, looks like it's going to be a race between District 1 Congressman Barry Moore and Alabama AG Steve Marshall.
We're not going to go too much into detail about their platforms as they're just the same old MAGA talking points, but we do need to talk about the Democratic contenders. Right now, it looks like we've got Mark Wheeler, Kari Lariat, and Kyle Sweetser. So we're going to start off the one who the latest polling showed as being in the lead, Kyle Sweetser. He's from Mobile. You may recognize him as he spoke at the 2024 DNC and campaigned for Kamala Harris. He'll be the first to tell you that historically he always voted Republican until his eyes were opened. Michelle, I don't know about you, but I am having a really hard time seeing him as anything but a Republican who only changed parties because they finally Googled what a tariff was. The GOP has historically made misogyny, racism, homophobia, sexism, and hatred the basis of their platform for decades. And he was still a Republican, which means that he either espoused those views or was complacent in them. I really want to know, has he truly changed or is this just an opportunity? Now, people can change. I will say that. Like, people can have their eyes open and
I believe in a good redemption.
100%. But I need him to answer that, and I need him to explain it. He has said some things on Twitter or X, whatever the hell you wanna call it, that have been pretty controversial and makes me kind of think that he hasn't. I've met him a few times. He's a super nice guy, but I still feel like he's trying to appeal to that, like, centrist Republican, Reagan Republican, never Trump crowd, and seems a little bit out of place when talking to true progressives. And this was further reinforced when doing the research for this episode. Any information about candidate platforms came directly from their candidate websites. He has nothing. There's a quick bio, talks about how the American dream is no longer possible for future generations, how he doesn't like the Trump administration, and then there's a donate button. But that's about it. Now, again, the deadline to file hasn't happened yet. There is a chance he could be waiting, but it seems a little weird to me that you have nothing you're talking about on your website. Technically, you filed first as far as I know. As far as I know, I met him back in the spring in April of 2025 and he said he was running. So, he's been looking at this for a good while. Honestly, I kind of would love to see him run as a Republican because he's the type of Republican I would love to see us get back to. I'm thinking about like the John McCain Republicans, the Kinsingers. That's who he reminds me a lot of. Is like an Adam Kinzinger type, somebody who is the Republican Party's just gone too far right for him versus him being truly on the left.
Yeah, he's definitely not, and that's what I was talking about earlier, that the middle being moved so far right that now they think that these never Trumpers are now the new left, and like, "Oh, no, 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 dear, you are still far right. You are still far right. You're nowhere near the middle. You are absolutely nail on the head. He has no talking points that are democratic or even left leaning. He still espouses like anti-trans rhetoric on social media in the current, it's not old stuff. It's not like anybody else where they dug up like a tweet from like 10 years ago. Oh no, this is like new stuff. And for me, I don't even think he's a traditional Republican. He may have some like I appear to be traditional, but he is still MAGA coded when it comes to like the anti-trans stuff. And I think he just hides it really well. And I just don't think he is MAGA enough to run against all the Republicans. I think he saw this as, well, they never have any Democrats run. So I'll run and I'll use their funds, their resources to bring the left even farther right.
I think we've run into this last several elections as the right's gone further right. The Democratic Party kind of feels like this dumping ground for everybody, and it's impossible to please everyone. But it kind of feels like we've got everything from like traditional Republicans to far left progressives in the same party now because the right's just gone so far to the other side. And I think that he's kind of a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I just don't think we need to appease them and that we need to start looking at our disenfranchised. I think there's more disenfranchised than there are middle of the road, not Trumpers. The Democrats have to produce progressives. That's what people want. Look at how many people cheered for Donnie across the US. Don't tell me that the fever isn't there. People I would have never expected to cheer for him was like, oh my God, he won, yay. And we need to keep showing people that we're going to produce what the left actually stands for. Stop settling because they might pull a few votes over.
We've always worried so much about the handful of centrists that that they completely alienate the left.
Yes, absolutely.
They've done that every time. It's just always been this fear of alienating those few centrists.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's the thing the Democratic Party need to realize is that they've allowed the goalpost to be moved so far to the right that everybody on the left is, yeah, we're far left now compared to what they are because they've allowed these, well, they were Republican and they won and now they're coming over here. They're still Republican.
So who else do we have?
Next, we have Drakari, and he's a Birmingham native with a super impressive business background. He's served as an executive for some pretty major companies such as L'Oreal and Whirlpool, but he was inspired to enter politics after an unfortunate run-in with the Michigan State Police. I actually read that whole article and everything
Oh,
that
it
he
was
went through.
crazy.
Yeah, where he was accused of driving under the influence. He had to file a lawsuit against the Michigan State Police, and it was absolutely insane. His platforms are about healthcare expansion, protecting rural hospitals, expanding technical and training programs, which we do. We've convinced ourselves that people must go to college, they must get a master's, they must put themselves in $100,000 in debt just to be able to live. So I'm glad he is looking at rebuilding those, working on community safety, which is really big, and police reform. We should be able to trust our officers. They should be here to work and serve the population that pays their wages, not the corporations. That's how it should be. And then common sense gun reform. For the love of God, we don't want anybody's fucking gun
Or their thoughts and prayers.
or their thoughts and
We
prayers.
just want something to be fixed.
I just want to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing with your gun and that all the guns are registered and that there's the proper safety nets in place. That's it. That's all we're asking for. And then responsibility if your firearm gets used in a harmful way. At the end of this day, like nobody wants to take your freaking guns. So, but then the last thing he has on, because he has a laundry list of things, but this is the good one, is supporting our vets. And I am 100% about this.
And there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done at the VA. I mean, I know there's been talk of privatizing the VA over the years, which is the worst thing you can possibly do because we know corporations don't make anything better.
The only thing they prioritize is profits.
Yeah, exactly. Shareholders. Um, Finally, we've got Mark Wheeler. He is a 32-year-old native of Heflin, Alabama. Millennials represent.
That's right.
Professionally, he comes from a blue collar manufacturing background, but now works in research and development. He's running on first and foremost congressional reform and term limits. Holla freaking Luya. And it's not just for Congress, but also for judges. He wants to reduce Alabama's dependency on the federal government. His website says, and I quote, Alabama has long benefited from federal funding, and we are grateful for the support that has helped sustain essential services and programs throughout our state. But I believe that it is time we take bold steps toward becoming more self sustaining, not to reject that support, but to reduce our reliance on it. Alabamians don't want a handout, they want a leg up, an opportunity to work to provide for their families and to contribute their fair share without being overtaxed or underpaid. He also believes that health care is a right, not a privilege, wants to expand Medicaid and Medicare. He believes in improving education in the state through improving pay and support for educators, expanding pre K access, and making community college and tech school free, and fighting for workers' rights by protecting unions and fighting for higher wages across the board for the middle class. I'm just going to say this, if we're basing it solely on their websites and how they have their platforms laid out, Mark Wheeler probably impressed me the most because he didn't just talk about what he wants to do. He went into how he wants to do it and how it can be done. Because I personally am so sick and effing tired of people running on these campaign promises that they can't deliver. Why did you even promise it? And that's the kind of stuff that bugs me about politicians in general is I would rather you under promise over deliver than over promise and under deliver. And I think that's where so much of the level of apathy comes in for so many Americans is we're just so tired of being let down.
Yeah, they talk about all the things they want to do, but they don't ever talk about how they're actually going to do it. So Mamdani is a really good example of addressing the problem, like talking about the problems that matter, but then also providing solutions, going ahead and solutioning for those problems in a pragmatic way, things that have proven to work. I like Wheeler's approach. I agree with you on that. It was one of the reasons why I started following him early on was because I felt like he was us. I think people need to realize too, if you're here in Baldwin County and you're listening to him talk about support for educators, improving their pay and expanding pre-K access, understand that we live in a very privileged bubble here in Baldwin County. We have a penny tax, which is socialism. It's socialism. Every dollar you spend gets taxed.
Also, our housing prices are so high, which means our property taxes are higher, which means the schools get a little bit better funding.
Exactly. And so historically, our schools, our public schools have been very well funded, like especially here since we've had an explosion because of Austal, because of Airbus, and we've had all of these new people moving here and all this new development, all these new homes, that has exploded our economy. You got to remember that's not true for the vast majority of Alabama. The vast majority of Alabama don't have these resources. So in Baldwin County, step outside of our privilege bubble for just a moment and realize that our reality is not the reality for the rest of the state when it comes to education and why platforms like this make sense outside of our bubble.
You know, you and I both come from a business background. Do you have SMART goals? So, SMART is an acronym. It's specific, measurable, achievable, or attainable, relevant, and time bound. Those are the goals typically businesses make you do at your annual, review time and stuff like that. But that should apply to politicians as well. You could promise me you're going to give me $1,000,000. Okay, great. But I know that you're not going to be able to do it. Like, there's things I want. And that was, I think, part of the issue I had with MAGA so much. They'd be like, well, Trump's going to do this. Trump's going to bring in trillions. I'm like, no, he can't. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, what's the plan here, bud?
There's no plan. Like, that's what drives me crazy. And so it is really refreshing to see somebody set up their campaign in that way where what he's talking about feels very specific and very realistic.
And I think that's what I liked about him best. But I think we've had this discussion before is that his approachability seems off. I feel like his people skills just need a little bit more massaging. And maybe that's just some instances of some bad timed questions or stuff like that. But I'd like to see more from him as we get closer to the actual primary election.
And a lot's gonna change in the coming weeks too, because the filing dates and things like that, like, everything's gonna become official, or there may be more candidates at this point. We don't know. But I think right now, we're at a really good start. It's amazing to see so much energy going into the midterms and so many strong candidates running. I think it's a universal experience for Alabama Blue Dots to feel like we don't have anyone to vote for. I know I've gone to the polls and seen there's, like, especially in the general election, there's president, and then there's not a single Democrat.
Oh god, yes.
So kind of feels like we just gotta take what we can get, but it's nice that we kinda don't have to.
And we actually have choices with the Democrats. It's not just a single Democrat, and we're just, that's the best we can do.
So what do we do with that is the question. Where do we go from here? So we're excited, but how do we win is the question.
We need to really look at the issues and don't just shop out of your own pocket. Shop out of your community's pocket, outside of your community. Look at other people.
Well, and it's also up to us to start bridging that political party gap and actually have conversations with Republicans who either don't know what's really going on, because a lot of them don't. There are a lot of people who are so tuned out and have no clue what's actually going on, or they're so intertwined in identity politics, they just vote for whoever has the R in front of their name because that's what they've always done. Now, I'm not talking about the Pizzagate, QAnon. I'm talking about the people who just haven't been paying attention. You were there with me at a protest recently, and we had a conversation with a counter protester who asked us, well, what has Trump done that was so bad? Turns out he had zero idea that innocent people were being swept up in immigration raids. He thought that exporting countries paid the tariffs. That has actually been the biggest thing I have found when talking to them is ask them who pays the tariff, because that is something that affects them, their pocketbook. I don't even touch on like identity politics, race, anything like that, because they shut down. And if they say the exporter, well, I'm sorry, you've been lied to. And show them that is not, you don't have to be an economist to know that. The guy asked us, like, well, ma'am, are you an economist? Well, you don't have to be a surgeon to see if someone's bleeding out on the side of the road. You don't have to be an economist to know how a tariff works.
Exactly. And you should have a baseline of how the economy works as a citizen so you vote appropriately. But this was also the same guy that looked us deadpan in the face and said that churches are welfare. So when he claimed that immigrants were getting welfare, he meant that they were going to churches and getting charity.
Yeah, they are 501(c)(3). They're a totally different thing.
Correct. But you saw him, he doubled down in that, oh no, that's welfare. And I was like, oh no, sir, that is not welfare.
But for a lot of people, they have been forced in this bubble. They either vote Republican because that's what they've always been told to do and what they've always done, but they don't pay attention. There is a significant portion of people out there who just don't have any idea what the hell is going on. And those are the people we need to get through. And like I said, I focused on just tariffs because that is something that affects them. It is a very clear black and white, yes or no, this is right or wrong answer. There's no nuance to it. The importing country pays the tariff. That doesn't change no matter what side of the aisle you were on.
Yeah, and you have a good point there. When most people vote for a candidate, it's just a preference. At least that's how it used to be. It's just a preference. But for a lot of people in the GOP, and more specifically the MAGA movement, supporting Trump became a part of their identity. You melded in, it was no longer about policy or just a choice. It became part of who they are. And there's actual research, and psychologists have been studying this for years, and it's called identity fusion and social identity theory. Essentially, that just means that, like, when a political figure becomes tied to your sense of self, any threat to that leader feels like a threat to you. So any criticism, no matter how factual it may be, hits the brain like an attack. And when something feels like an attack, the brain does not evaluate facts, it defends. So you said they shut down. They just, anything that makes them contradict themselves. And that is called identity protective thinking. And what allows people to dismiss evidence, twist information, blame someone else. It's not because they're malicious. It's because accepting the truth would mean admitting I was wrong about who I am. And it can psychologically feel like they're falling off of a cliff. And the brain is hardwired to protect its sense of identity. This in no way dismisses those who follow Trump or have done this because they love hate and racism. What it does is it explains a subsect of the right who keep voting for Trump even when they are confronted with facts time and time again, how their brains work and how they're able to twist themselves and the facts to avoid accepting they made a mistake. And I think that's when we start having those conversations. It's going to be a hard pill for them to swallow no matter how many facts you put out there. And we've got to figure out a way for them to accept that responsibility, but also untie themselves from that identity because they've got to start doing that. It's the ones that wake up and realize, oh shit, it's bad. They learned how to unwrap their identity from this piece.
There are a lot of people I talked to after the last election who just didn't vote. And I work in real estate. And when I mentioned, like, these tariffs are going to hurt the real estate industry. Well, what do you mean? How are they going to hurt? Like, no, they won't. Ma'am, let me explain to you how a tariff works. And suddenly you saw that face, that look of regret, like, oh shit, I didn't know that. The Democrats have always been terrible with messaging. Yeah, I remember a person I spoke to about the tariffs right after the election said, well, why didn't Kamala explain that during the debate? I said, well, she shouldn't have to. It wasn't her job to give you a basic civics and economics lesson. But the Democrats do have to be better about doing that. It's not just about Trump bad, Trump awful, Trump does this wrong. We need to start explaining why he's wrong, how he's wrong. It should have been mentioned very early on that when Trump was talking about the tariffs, the Democrats should have made a whole campaign over this is going to cost you, the American taxpayer, more money. And that's where we've gone wrong is we're not meeting people where they are. The Democrats kind of have this assumption that people are more engaged and educated on these things than they really are. It's more of a engagement thing where a lot of people just don't pay attention to politics and they don't pay attention to what's going on in the world because they're so overwhelmed with family and work and their own lives.
Wish they would had an army of Katie Porters in her whiteboard. Regardless of the stuff that's come out about Katie, I loved her whiteboard.
Yeah, I heard her whiteboard. I really wanted her to run for president just so I could see a way for her to sneak that into a debate. Like I could see her wearing a big ass necklace and be like, "What? It's a fashion accessory." To just
I
have a
know.
giant
Well, when she
whiteboard on a
put that
string.
big old hippo tooth fucking bitch in her place in one of the congressional meetings from the Heritage Foundation with her, this is Head Start, and we invest X amount. It tickled me pink.
Got the head of the FDA to like agree to do free COVID tests the other country. Like basically made his spine jelly.
But I mean, she did such a great job of doing basic education around, oh, you're misinformed. Let me show you how you're misinformed. And she would break it down. And I think that's where we talk about meeting people intellectually. Coming from tech, learning how to, and I don't like the words dumbing it down because you're not. You're meeting the person where they at when you start to explain things. You're correlating it to things that make sense to them. So when I explain something that's very complex, I may go, "Oh, it's kind of like this," and then I use something that's very simple, that's very similar, or at least connects with them, and then you see little light bulbs going off. And I think that's very important. If you're not up for that skill set, that's fine. We just need people to attempt to meet this skill set and start looking at ways where they can connect the dots because it's just not about connecting the blue dots, it's about connecting all the dots for people who are not informed and making them understand the sense of urgency on why being connected politically in their own community is so important. It's not an every 4-year thing, it's
Everyday thing. And another thing too is we've got to really look at this as every election is an opportunity, not just to win, because we're not going to win every election. No one's going to win every election. But at the end of the day, we've got to send the message that your job is on the line. Tommy Tuberfuck and Barry Moore should not feel so comfortable in their roles that they can do the bullshit and say the bullshit that they do every single day. What reason does he have to give a shit? Because he believes that he's going to win no matter what, because he has won by such large margins. Notice that Republicans or Democrats in battleground districts tend to play a little bit safer and not say as much stupid crap as our politicians do. So at the end of the day, even if we don't win this election, we got to send a message that your job is on the line. You better actually do the damn thing if you want to keep it next time.
absolutely, and that should go for Democrats. 'Cause it makes it competitive. If you believe that your job is on the line, then you're gonna start prioritizing your actual constituents. But that's constituents, that means you show up to the damn polls and you don't do this privilege thing where you're like, "Oh, I'm not gonna vote." Baby, we did that back in 2015. I was a Bernie bro. I fully admit that I was not happy with Hillary Clinton because of her Goldwater girl days, her super predator bullshit. I was full on like, I cannot vote for her because, like, I
He's been right about everything that
I know, I know, I know, but I made that mistake. We sometimes in life, we move forward by making mistakes. I made that mistake, and I will never make that mistake again. I will never make that mistake again. I thought there's no way this ding dong's gonna win. He's a fucking grifter. People gotta see this, and when he won, it was a very big surprise to me. Like, it really was, and then I learned a very harsh lesson that my purity, my stance, my privilege does not outweigh prioritizing other people's safety above protecting my own personal feelings. So we learned that lesson. Staying disengaged is not it. You have to be engaged. You want to see change? Go be the change you want to see. Get involved, find better candidates if you don't want to run yourself, and then you help them run. And you keep doing it.
All right. Well, we want to thank y'all so much for tuning in this week. We hope y'all will join us in the coming weeks. Next week, we're going to be talking to Clyde Jones, who is running for U.S. House of Representatives from Alabama District 1. And after that, we'll have Robert Hunter from Alabama State House, the seat 28, along with other candidates in the coming weeks for other offices. If you're considering a run for office, please don't forget that the deadline to file is January 23rd, and you can find more information at aldemocrats.org. If you have any questions you would like us to ask candidates in the upcoming weeks, please visit our website at famabluedots.com to submit your questions. Thank you all so much again for joining us, and we hope y'all will tune in next week.